Warning: some of these stories contain graphic content. Listener discretion is advised. I'm 25 right now, and this story happened when I was 10 years old. I was downstairs watching TV late at night with my mom and sisters. Everyone decided to head off to bed, and I was left alone downstairs. I started drifting off, and all of a sudden, someone started banging our door really hard. I'm talking like, let me the F in really hard. I was so scared. I just sat there frozen, staring at the door like my life depended on it. My dog was laying next to me and also just stared at the door. He never barked or moved an inch, which was really odd, because he always barked at the door. The banging never stopped for what seemed like a solid 5 minutes. But in reality, it was probably only 60 seconds. I looked at my dog, and I think because I finally moved my dog to snap out of his trance, he looked at me for a split second and jumped and ran towards the door. He still didn't bark, but instead started to turn his head like he was confused. I finally got the courage to get up and open the blinds to see what was going on. And there was this young lady, maybe around 20 or 25. She was just standing there holding her left breast. She had blonde hair, light skin, and was covered in blood. It seemed like her shirt was ripped off, and her hair was a complete mess, with leaves, and her mascara was everywhere. I remember thinking that maybe she got beat up or was in a car crash. Either way, I immediately went up to go open the door. As soon as I unlocked it, my mom, out of nowhere, slammed her hand on the door and relocked it. I had no idea where she came from. She was just upstairs, and all of a sudden, she was right behind me. I was just so focused on the door that when my mom slammed her hand on it, it just knocked me back into reality. The reality of knowing the most simple, basic house rules is to never open a door for strangers, especially in the middle of the night. I looked up at my mom, and I could see her eyes were wide. And I think I even started crying. She put her hand on my shoulder and moved me away from the door. She yelled, "Who is it?" And the girl yelled back that our boyfriend beat her up, and they lived in the apartments across the street. Mind you, we live in a townhouse in a cul-de-sac. Our unit was all the way in the back, where you would have to start the turn. We were the first unit in the row. But where she pointed her and her boyfriend's place was quite a ways away from us. My mom asked for her name, and she said something that sounds like something Annie. Maybe Bethany or Stephanie or I don't know, something like that. I saw my mom hesitate to open the door. But after she yelled, "Please help me," my mom opened the door and stepped out and pulled it to close it shut, but not completely shut. I checked the crack of the door behind her to make sure that she was okay, and also to see what was going on. The woman we'll call Bethany. Bethany was thanking my mom and asked to come in because she was scared of her boyfriend was going to come after her. My mom refused and explained to her that she could not let her in for the safety of her 4 kids, but said that she would sit outside with her. My mom yelled at me to grab the phone and to call the police, and I did. My mom started to ask what happened to her and what specific unit she lived in. She pointed to her specific one and told my mom that the building number in her unit was letter B. This silver SUV pulled up a little later, and she ran towards it yelling, That's my sister!" And then just ran and just jumped in. The car sped off without another word of her or a single word from the sister. My mom looked back at me, just confused. And she just came back in and shut the door and made sure to lock it. We stood there and just looked at each other. I asked my mom what about the police, and she said she would just wait for them downstairs if I wanted to go to bed. I was too scared to leave her alone, so I just waited with her. Once they arrived, my mom explained what happened to the officer. said that she did the right thing not letting her inside. Weird thing is, my dog never barked once until the cops came knocking at the door. They also explained that they've been receiving similar calls around this area recently. Even worse, the next morning, we were all packed up ready to go to the grocery store. As we passed the building, we could tell the apartment was empty. Like, no one had been living there. Maybe they just didn't have any furniture or anything, but it was still weird. He never came out right after the night, and we never saw the girl either, or that SUV. Bethany, Stephanie, I hope you're okay if this was real. But also, if it's not, don't ever knock on my door, ever again. Update, May 20, 2021. I did ask my mom to elaborate on everything, so after my mom yelled at me to call the police, I walked away to grab the landline to the kitchen. When I walked away, my mom said this to her. Now you listen to me. If you try to get over on me and hurt my family, I will do worse than what that pretend boyfriend did to you. And I will unalive you myself. Nothing means more to me than my children. Not my life, not my freedom. I will help you if you need anything, but you will not enter my home. So don't ask me again to get inside, or I'm gonna go inside and I will lock you out and not help you. Do you understand me? I asked her what the girl said or did after that, and she said that she just looked at her and just kind of looked all nervous and said that she understood and appreciated us helping her. That's about the time I returned to the door after calling the police and heard my mom asking her what happened and where she lived, etc., etc. Needless to say, my mom was a boss in that moment. This is my story. I'm a 28-year-old guy, currently working as a volunteer at a pet rescue shelter. I've been working like this for 2 years. I love this job. This happened about a year ago. It all began when a new girl started working at a shelter. I'll call this girl Gracie. Now, Gracie was 21 years old and incredibly shy, or at least it seemed that way at first. During her first few weeks, she would only talk about one-worded sentence, no matter how often the rest of us tried to get her involved in social stuff. She would decline. A few weeks in, she started making comments like, I just don't like people, and I just prefer to be left alone. People obliged and left her alone. When she had been working at the shelter for about a month and a half, she started following around a few guys like a lost puppy, drooling when she thought no one was watching her. I was one of those guys. Her behavior was outright creepy, as she was just not talking much but just following me around, staring at me and others like a dog in heat. At one point, I went straight with her and told her I found her behavior very creepy. I told her if she's not careful, because some might interpret her behavior as harassment, so she just looked away. Shit went down a few weeks later, when I managed to stumble upon Gracie's Tumblr. Gracie has submitted a picture of herself, standing with one of the puppies from the shelter. She had added a lot of hashtags about our local shelter, apparently in an attempt to spread awareness. In curiosity, I went to her actual Tumblr, and oh boy, it was just a Pandora's box of creepiness. Basically, Gracie's Tumblr could be split into 3 parts. One part was pictures of random people, which most of them were at work, and all of them was obviously set without consent. All the pictures have stories attached to them, about how each person was a bad person. Most of these stories about how the person has been bullying Gracie, or have been making inappropriate and homophobic comments, and acting like the person was just genuinely a crappy person. All of the last kind of stories ended with Gracie stepping in and telling the person to check their privileges, as if the story wasn't unbelievable enough on its own. The next part was pictures of guys Gracie thought was very attractive and hot, both real and fictional. In between the pictures were stories about these people mixed in various relationships. Gracie even made up stories about how these 2 guys at work were being in a relationship, and she had countless of pictures of them doing stuff like talking, caring for the animal or such, with the notations of, "See, they're totally in love. Gays are so cute." Both of these guys were in a healthy relationship at the time of their own. The last part was Gracie's either blogging or resubmitting texts of social justice, especially for the extremist parts of Tumblr. I found a post about them talking about how a guy at work had told her off because she had been looking in his direction. The conclusion to the post was that I don't see what his problem was anyways. Guys think about intercourse all the time. It's not like it's a violation when guys think about intercourse. They can't actually get harassed because they would never actually object to intercourse. The post has been reblogged with various comments of, "These guys are dumb." At first, I wasn't sure what to do about all this. I knew something definitely had to be done about it, but I didn't know what. In the end, I went to my boss and we talked about it. She told me that this is probably just Gracie living her fantasy on the net, but acknowledged it had to be stopped. The three of us had a talk, and Gracie was utterly humiliated that someone found her Tumblr. She didn't outright apologize, but she did seem to have to stop and understood what she did was borderline illegal. The next few weeks, Gracie became a shadow, creeping around the shelter, somehow even more antisocial than she had before. My boss actually kept her around because she was working for free at odd hours at the time. Her Tumblr seemed to get deleted, but I had a creepy feeling that this wasn't the end of it. About 2 weeks later, I was checking out the accounts that had been friends with Gracie's account. Mainly I wanted to find out how Gracie's lies and stories had spread. Mostly it was about her social justice stuff and the gay stories about the guys at work had been reblogging. Though, all of this, I found Gracie had a new Tumblr, which was way creepier than the old one. The new Tumblr didn't post a lot, but not at all like the first one. But those did had a lot creepier posts than the old ones used to be. One of the first posts was an explanation on how she was forced to shut down her old Tumblr. Some lies about how it was because that she was supporting the LGBT community and her boss was thinking ill about it. The next couple posts were either updates on the gay couple and stories about them, or posts about this really crappy dude at work. What made these posts really terrifying was that she made a threat about unaliving me. She even wrote long paragraphs about how she would strangle me, poison me, or stab me, and how great it would feel to unalive a straight person such as me. What really made my heart jump was when I found a picture of my house. A few similar posts had been made about our coworkers, but apparently it was mainly me. She held a grudge towards me. I went to my boss again, this time telling her I need to get the police involved too because this sort of behavior just got way too far out. Gracie was called in again and got an earful, but during the entire talk, it became obvious Gracie had no idea about her behavior was just wrong. She told us it was just stuff inside her head, that she would never actually do it, but when we asked why she had been uploading pictures of my house, why she had been stalking people and keeping taking pictures of them without their knowledge, she just made up some bullcrap about it wasn't us on those pictures. I finally blew my fuse and told Gracie I would talk to the police because I sure as hell wasn't going to stand by some creep following me around with a camera. The police got involved, and as part of the case, they confiscated Gracie's phone. Her camera apparently led to another case of drug possession, and Gracie was later taken to jail. I don't know what happened to her then, but I'm hoping that she found a place where she can no longer upload bullcrap on her blog. I was reading some of these scary stories at work the other day, and I remember a creepy encounter that happened to me and my friend and my sister. This happened when we were a lot younger. I would say we were still in elementary school, maybe 7th grade. For context, the town I lived in was pretty chill, and we had a movie theater that was next to a few stores and restaurants, so our moms would just drop us off, and sometimes we would walk around after the movie was over and just hang out at a Walmart or a Whataburger. This one particular night, we were in the Walmart parking lot on our way back to the movie theater to get picked up, and then an older man with a vehicle, the very cliche one, called to us and said, "Wow, I can't open my DVD. Can you guys please come over here and help me open it?" Now, my sister and I immediately thought, why would a grown man ask us kids to help him to open up a DVD player in the parking lot? My friend, who's a male by the way, immediately started walking towards the man, and we stopped him before he got close to him, saying that it was weird and we should get away from him. My friend wanted to be the man in the situation, but we were just kids. What was he gonna do? Anyways, we get really scared and end up sprinting away and not looking back. It wasn't as creepy as other stories here, but I'm glad that we didn't stick around to find out what the man was gonna do. I recently moved to a new house, an old building that was built in the 1920s. It was located in a quiet neighborhood. Everything was fine until I started noticing weird things. About 2 weeks ago, I saw a weird man hanging around my property. It was late at night and he seemed to be rummaging through my trash. At first, I thought it was just someone who was lost or a homeless man looking for food, so I didn't pay much attention to it. But things started to get more worrying. One night, I saw him through my kitchen window, just standing there, staring inside my house. He was wearing dirty clothing and had a blank look into his face, almost like he wasn't really seeing what he was looking at. I turned on the outside lights on, and he ran away quickly. Since that day, I keep seeing him sporadically. Sometimes I find footprints in the mud near my windows, or objects moved around the house. One time, I even found an old shoe half buried in my garden, like someone was trying to hide something. The worst part is that I started hearing strange noises at night. I heard scratching at the windows, light knocks on the wall, and quiet whispers that seemed to come from outside. I called the police several times, but every time they arrived, the man was gone. They don't even find any traces of him. My friends think I'm paranoid and that I'm just imagining things because of the stress of moving in, but I can't help feeling that I really think someone's watching me or trying to scare me. I'm starting to doubt my own sanity. Sometimes I wonder if I'm imagining all of this, but the footprints, the moved objects, and the noises, I know they're real. Has anyone experienced something similar or have any advice of what should I do? Anything would help and be greatly appreciated. Thanks for reading. I need help. Nobody believes me. Nobody. I'm a 41-year-old female, but I was 20 when I attended a college in northern Pennsylvania. I lived off the campus and had a part-time job at the local mall. The mall was just over a mile away, and I would walk to and from work regularly. The mall generally closed around 9 p.m., and I would finish my closing task and start walking home around 9:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the latest. Occasionally, I would get a ride home with a coworker, but most of them were just high schoolers getting picked up by their parents. One night, I was walking my familiar route home. There were never many people out and about downtown until I got back into the campus, which I would cut across to get home. This night, I was only a few blocks away from the mall. I noticed a parked van in the next corner, but didn't do anything of it initially. There was always a smattering of cars parked around. The van appeared to be running, and the headlights were on. As I got a bit closer, I noticed a sliding door on the side was open. I definitely noticed, but assumed someone must be loading something into or out of one of the local businesses along the street. As I started to walk past the van, There was a sudden flurry of movement to my left. There had apparently been a man crouching behind a dumpster there, and he was running straight at the open van door. The scary part was that I was directly between him and the open van. He then started trying to shove me into the van. I screamed, and I can only credit my complete awkward lack of coordination for what happened next. I tripped and stumbled when he surprised me. So when he hit me, I was already sort of falling to the ground. The force he hit me with only got my head and shoulders into the open door, while the majority of my body was on the ground. I remember that he grabbed me by my waist and was trying to hoist me up and through the door, but I was just discombobulated, dead weight. He jumped over the van, grabbed a handful of my hair, and started pulling me off the ground into the van. This is when I see headlights from a car turning down the street washed over me, and I could briefly see that it was this white guy in a black hoodie. When I saw the car, I screamed louder and started wildly flailing my arms. I heard their brakes screeched, and the guy let go of my hair. I jumped back, and the hooded bastard slammed the door shut, and seconds later, accelerated away. A cute little white-haired Polish woman had been in the car that turned down the street at that exact moment to save me. She hugged me and told me that I was safe. It was then when I realized that I was still screaming. She sat on the sidewalk with me, and then walked me to her car. Cell phones were relatively new. Neither of us had one. She drove me to the police station and stayed with me for a while as I answered questions to make a report. As far as I know, they never caught the guy. My housemate with a car let me borrow it any time I was going to work after that. And I never walk around downtown after that. I had nightmares for a while. I can't help but think what could have happened to me if I was taken. This story was a response from the previous story that you just heard. This sounded exactly like what happened to me years ago. I'm so glad that you made it out of that. Bless that Polish woman. She was an angel in that moment. Mine happened in Albuquerque almost 40 years ago. I was in college and had an apartment at the edge of town. It was a fourplex and had a couple of undeveloped lots near me. It was around 9:30 at night, and I was doing my laundry in my shared laundry room at the apartment. I needed quarters for the machine, so I walked across the main road to the 7-Eleven. As I walked up to the door, I see this big, ugly man standing outside the door, just leering at me. My radar goes off, and I wanted to turn around, but I'm walking, so I figure I'll just go inside and just wait until he leaves. As I walked into the store, that's when I see that ugly guy as a friend buying something from him. They had this white, windowless van. It was also the only car in the area. Now, I'm really worried. I go inside and started strolling through these 3 aisles just to wait him out. This action raises the suspicions of the 7-Eleven clerk. He asked me if I'm going to buy anything. I told him I need quarters, but I'm waiting for those guys outside to leave. The clerk asked me again. I told him the same thing. Clerk asked me a 3rd time, and then asked me to leave. The 2 creeps are still outside the door, now watching me. I told the clerk, who looked like to be around 17 or 18 years old, that I'm scared to go outside because of those guys. The clerk has now raised his voice at me and tells me if I don't leave, he's going to be calling the cops. I said, yeah, call the cops. Those guys are freaking me out in the parking lot. Then the clerk says, I have a gun. I just stared at him. Are you kidding me? I say. He looks so scared and shaken. He has been watching me, not even noticing the brutes outside. He, the clerk, was scared of me. Now I'm freaking scared of the clerk that's gonna shoot me. What the hell? I look outside and I don't see the guys anymore. Okay, I'll peek. See where they went. No sign of them. Okay, I step outside and start to walk back towards my apartment. As I get across the main road, which was pretty wide, I hear something behind me. It's the ugly guy, now standing up from his crouched position from behind some weedy shrubs in an empty lot next to a 7-Eleven. Oh crap. I keep walking towards my building, but my front door is exposed and near the street. I don't want to see which apartment I'm in, so I head towards my car. As I'm halfway across the street, he starts running at me. I can't make it back to 7-Eleven. He's blocking the route, and his friend is now in the white van, shouting instructions to him. I run towards my car. He gets really close. He even brushes my back with his hand, trying to grab my hair. I make it to my car. I start it up and pull onto my street, intending to head into another store to yell for help. By the way, there was no cell phones at this time. This ugly guy now jogs into my street and stands in the middle of the road, staring at me. His friend is now parked across my street in the van. I'm heading towards the ugly guy, and I slow down. As I slowed, he gives me this head tilt up and a snort like he got me cornered. I think many women have seen this head tilt, so it's so infuriating. He stands in the middle of the street, his superior smile at me, and that stupid head nodding at me completely pisses me off now. I punch the accelerator, headed straight towards him. It takes me a minute for my old beat-up car to respond. He's still smiling at me when he realizes that I'm starting to head right at him. Now, he's running for my car, and his friend from the van is yelling at him to run faster. I keep at him. He runs into the sidewalk, and I follow him up the curb. At the last minute, he dives behind a low, cinder block wall. I don't want to hit the wall and stall my car, so I swerved away and head down the street to the 24-hour supermarket. Now I'm shaking so hard that I can barely grip the steering wheel. I pull up right to the automatic doors of the store and park my car on the sensor doormat, so the doors keep opening and closing. I am now determined to get the police here. I'm furious and still terrified as I run into the store, screaming for help. I yell at the manager to call the police. Everyone just stares at me. Manager tells me to move my car. Now I'm completely pissed off at everyone's response. I go past the manager and start grabbing his phone. That scares him though enough to call the police himself. It takes 30 minutes for the cops to show off. They stroll in, look casually around. Manager points at me, and I tell him, 2 guys tried to kidnap me and followed me. I jump in my car and take off at high speed. Run a red light. I figured they'll chase me just for that. I head back to my apartment, and it works. They follow me. I stepped out of my apartment. Of course, no one's around. They walk up to me, facing me side by side. Just for reference, I'm 225 pounds. I'm 5'7", 19 to 20 years old, seemingly not a threatening presence. Facing them, I start telling them my story. As I get to the part about the ugly guy staying up from his crouched position, the younger officer does the same head tilt back and snort and says, "Well, what were you wearing?" What the actual F? There's a 2-second moment of silence while I look at this guy in his uniform. Then I lost it. I raised both my arms up and yelled, This is what I'm wearing. A t-shirt and baggy jeans. As I'm yelling this, mind you, I'm about 6 feet away from them. The same officer reaches for his gun. Are you kidding me? Luckily, the officer stopped him with a hand onto his partner's chest. I'm so shaken and disappointed at this time that I feel like I'm about to cry from frustration. I don't cry. I yell at him. I yell, This is what I'm wearing. Does this turn you on? Does this outfit mean I'm allowed to be attacked? What about your girlfriend, your daughter, your mom, aunt? Is all of this okay? I'm actually screaming out at both of them at this point. And I say, what about those guys? How many women have they grabbed and unalived? Anyone you know? F you. I want to file a police report. They say, okay. They both turn around, go to the car, got in, and drove away. Nope. No report. No response. Nothing. I'm left standing there. I still wonder to this day, how many women those monsters grabbed, and if they ever got caught. My female friend came over to visit me for a long weekend. I, 20-year-old female, won't be letting her stay over ever again. Here's some backstory. We were friends for about 3 months before we moved to separate states, but we continue our friendship virtually until now. It has been a healthy friendship with open communication. We have had our disagreements, but mostly talked about it and just moved on. They mostly revolve her believing that I don't open up enough. And for me, she does this thing that are inconsiderate at times, like be jealous of my long-term friends and have odd attitude problems at times. She can also be a bit obsessive and get upset when I don't text her more than a day. She got loads of my photos saved in her phone and remembers every little thing about me. It has a list of my interests. I've seen it endearing until now. The trip. Day 1. The first day of the trip was great. She was bubbly and brought me a gift with a sweet note of appreciation. We went clubbing and we headed to the bed separately for the night. This is where things got weird. Remember, we slept separately. Well, I woke up and she was in my bed, but not in my bed. She was sitting upright on top of the blankets next to me, with her feet straight out and her back against my headboard while looking forward. I was startled and said, "Oh," instinctively. She just looked at me. She turned her head towards me very slowly. She never said that she was waiting for me to wake up, or maybe she was just uncomfortable on the couch. She just said nothing. Then she left my room. I have no clue how long she was sitting there. Day 2 to day 3. So on day 2, in the morning, we walked the city, where she was engaged and wanted to hold my hand while we were out and about. By midday, this is still day 2, her attitude has shifted completely, and she is near mute. She isn't conversing with me, enjoying any activities, or even smiling anymore. At the bar, arcade, or even at home watching movies. You know how those driving games take a silly photo of your profile pic on the leaderboard? I was blowing a kissy face in mine. I glanced at hers and even snapped a pic without her noticing. Her head was tilted forward, looking up at the camera. She was blank-faced, and you can mostly see the whites of her eyes. C, the orphan from 2009. Anyways, for the rest of the trip, she continued not to smile. She was cold to every service worker. She responded with one-word answers, otherwise complained about any other thing. I asked her, "Are you okay?" A couple of times she replied, "I'm fine," avoiding eye contact every time. Car rides were silent. Dinners were silent. On day 4, the final day, I drove her to the airport at 3 in the morning. I asked if she enjoyed her visit, and she said it was okay. It was fine. I told her I enjoyed having her. She boarded her flight and left. I couldn't figure what caused this 180-degree shift. I paid for everything, took her to all sorts of events that she wanted to go to, but even took an entire day off to take her out more. I felt myself overcompensating because I felt insecure of being a terrible host or something. I've had several friends stay with me and express to me that they enjoyed themselves so much that they never wanted to leave. I don't believe I did anything wrong, so I don't know. When she arrived home, she did not contact me, but she posted pictures and videos of me captioning "mine" on her social media. I haven't brought this conversation up to her yet. All my family and friends believe I narrowly avoided a Selena, Yolanda, Lifetime film situation, and that I was potentially with someone unstable. So tell me, what do you think? This isn't one of those stories like, oh, this looks sketchy. Oh, I almost died. But when I was 16, I genuinely believed that a man in Walmart wanted to kidnap me. It started off with him following me. I noticed that he was in every aisle my mom and I were in. But at first, I thought it was a coincidence. He was an older man, probably in his 50s or 60s, and I just had this bad feeling about him. Another man in front of us dropped his wallet, and the creepy guy walked up and stuck the wallet back into the man's back pocket instead of just handing it to him, which I thought was pretty odd. Shortly after that, my mom walked up to the self-checkout, and I wasn't feeling well, so I asked her for her car keys. I walked to the other side of the store where we had parked, but I had forgotten where the car was, so I decided to sit on the bench outside of the hair salon and wait for my mom to finish up. While I was playing on my phone, I got this uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching me. I glanced up and saw the same creepy guy staring at me. Now, there's two things you need to know. One, the hair salon was closed, so he had no reason to be standing outside of it. And two, his groceries were bagged up, so he had already finished shopping. He asked how I was doing, and I mumbled out, "Fine," and glanced back down at my phone, trying to make myself look busy. I kept looking up at the corner of my eye, and every time, he was just there, staring at me. That's when my blood ran cold. I just now realized that he's been standing right behind us when I asked my mom for her car keys. He must have overheard and most likely was planning on following me out to the parking lot. My instincts kicked in, and I had, and to this day, still do, a strong feeling that this man was up to no good. I kept trying to call my mom discreetly, but she just wouldn't answer the phone, so I got up and walked back over to the other side, where she was still ringing up her groceries. I stayed with her, and we walked out the store. The man was still there, outside the hair salon. I watched through the window when we walked out the doors, and he never took his eyes off me. I'm so glad that I never walked out of the parking lot alone, because who knows what that man would have done to me. This is a really quick story. In 1991, I got on a bus going the wrong way in the new city of Santa Monica, with no cash or phone, or no idea where I was heading. The bus driver kicked everyone else off the bus in Culver City, but wouldn't let me off. He told me we were going to his apartment, and got on the freeway. At this point, I told him I had a disease, and he told me that he will use some rubber. But then the bus depot people came on and told him that a bunch of the passengers had called in saying that he kept a girl on the bus and wanted to know what was happening. So he dropped me off at a UCLA where my aunt was working. I was spending the summer with her, and that was the end of my adventure. If I hadn't been kidnapped, I would have been in huge trouble. I had no idea where I was, and I didn't even know my aunt's number. I think about this all the time. So about 9 years ago, my boyfriend, now husband, who is a 44 male, and I, 40 female. We were driving cross country from California to Florida. My husband had an enormous Rottie named Kuma. It means bear in Japanese, and oh my gosh, it fits. He was 110 pounds. I had only just met Kuma, maybe 2 days ago prior. Since my hubby and I were in a long distance relationship at the time, so Kuma and I, didn't know each other well yet. But he was a great boy and talked a lot. So we stopped at a gas station so we can just get out and stretch and just use the restrooms. He got Kuma off his leash and said that he'd take him out for a walk. I offered to do it instead since I didn't need to use the restroom urgently. Now, I'm not a small girl. I'm 5'10", but I'm petite, as my husband calls me. I'm maybe 125 pounds. My husband is almost 6'5", and he's built like a Viking. so dogs like Kuma wouldn't affect him one way or another if he tried to bolt or chase a squirrel or, something. This big dog was made for my hubby. I, on the other hand, will admit that I was nervous when he handed me the leash to hold onto him, because if he decided to try anything, I was not going to be strong enough to hold him. My husband noticed my nervousness. He just smiled and said, "Don't worry, he's well trained. He won't take off, and he won't let anything happen to you. I promise." It's important to note that Kuma had no formal protection training. He just loved whatever his dad did, and knew that he was supposed to protect and keep it safe when Dad wasn't there to do it himself. Once he was sure that I was comfortable, my husband headed inside, leaving Kuma and I near the far right side of the gas station, with a little dirt path near the wooded area. It was very dark, and there was this little light being shed so far of the building. But it was a busy little station, and I could see people, so I didn't feel isolated or anything. So I start to walk slowly, allowing Kuma to take his surroundings in. That's when I hear some noise behind me. I turn, startled to see a man walking. He notices me and slows his gait, looks around, backs at me, and smiles, very eerily. Uh-oh. He changes direction suddenly, heading towards me. He says, "It's awfully late, dangerous out here alone. Are you alone?" Something in his eyes told me to just run. Run. Just as I'm about to bolt and start hustling towards the people in the light of the station, I hear another sound. This one is new to me. As I clench my hand, preparing to run or die fighting off this creepy McCreeperson, I felt something. The leash. Kuma. In that moment, I forgot that I was not alone at all. Not by a long shot. The sound I heard was a warning. A very lethal one. It was the deepest, most menacing growl I have ever heard come out of anything. That beautiful beast stepped out from behind me, where he'd been observing the threat like a giant dragon rising from the shadows. The man's creepy smile slipped right off his face, as did a few shades of color. Kuma placed his large body between mine and the approaching strangers, and pressed back against me, urging me towards the jeep. He didn't have to tell me twice. Kuma. I turned and started making my way back to the car, still holding the leash for dear life. Kuma walked backwards, pressed against me the whole time, watching my back until we made it back to where we parked. I tried to look for the man, but he either ran back to wherever he came from or made it inside, taking a much longer route. Well, just outside of Kuma's reach. I told my husband what happened, and to be honest, I'm not too sure who would have done more damage to that man if they had located him. Every day for the next 9 years, Kuma was my best friend and guardian. Rest in peace, baby boy. I'm still pretty jarred from this experience, but I figure it'd be easier to share than just dwell on this on my own. A couple days ago, someone broke into my house while I was asleep. I work night shift, so sleeping during the day is something you learn to get used to. Around 6:30 p.m., I heard what I thought it was, a loud knocking sound coming from outside, and my dog was going completely ballistic from it. For reference, I live in a farm out in the middle of nowhere. My closest neighbor is about a half a mile away, but, back to the story. I, somewhat, woke up, but don't really think anything of it since my neighbors like to shoot their guns and this is somewhat of a hunting season. As I started falling back asleep, my heart started fluttering weird, like as if I knew something wasn't right. That's when I heard the loudest footsteps throughout the entire house. The dogs are still barking, but they start to quiet down. That's when I really begin to worry. When I think my dogs will protect me at this time, fat chance. The footsteps stop on the other side of the bedroom door and doesn't move. I really think that this is how I was going to die, and although I had a weapon in my room, I knew I couldn't get to it without being heard. It felt like an eternity before the steps moved around and towards my brother's bedroom. Rustling can be heard loudly through the house and things being thrown around. I knew they were in my brother's room. Some of his friends were in these shady situations, and I knew that this had to be one of them. I heard the footsteps coming back to my door, and the doorknob begins to shuffle and move. I immediately turned my back towards the door and closed my eyes tight. I had my hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. The door opens, but that's it. Then, he leaves as a car drives down the road. I finally bucked up my courage and to get out of my bed. Everything in the room except for my brother's room was undisturbed. I immediately called my brother and asked if any of his friends were over here. He said that no, not that he knew of, and then I told him what happened. He got off the phone with me to start calling around. I went back to bed and noticed that I still had my window cracked over from earlier, and realized I had my sheets off of me wearing only a t-shirt to bed. If it was only who I think it was, this wasn't a random event. One of my brother's friends always had eyes out for me, and the fact that he saw me sleeping and in just a t-shirt makes me freak out. Whether or not he took something out of my brother's room or knew that I was home alone before having to leave to work later that night, I don't know. I'll post an update when I hear from my brother. You move out into the country to get away from the activity of the city life, and you just let your guard down. That's when something like this happens. Sometimes, country life isn't so safe after all. Update. Sorry y'all for the last update. It's been a crazy week, but thank you for bearing with me on this. My brother got back to me with the news, and I absolutely dread from hearing it. None of his friends said or claimed to have been to our house at this time of the incident. Now I'm even more afraid of who was in my home and what their intentions were. They could have been scoping out my house during the day. I just hope I don't have to have another visit like that anytime soon. But if there is a next time, I'll be sure to be ready for them. Okay, picture this. I'm around 16-year-old girl. It's the middle of winter and around 7 p.m. I'm coming down with a mild cold. My parents are home and my sister is off at a school event. So I take this time to take a long bath to try and soothe whatever is in my system. About 10 minutes into the bath, I hear a frank knock at my front door. This doesn't strike me as too odd, as everyone in my family had a tendency to lose anything. I get out of the bath and put on a robe. I'm about to walk up to the door when something stops me. I'm not sure what, but I get the urge to check with my parents. I grab my phone and I texted them. Something with, "Hey, are you locked out?" The knocking at the door got louder. My dog, who was in his crate, started barking. My phone rings and my dad responds with, "No, I'm with your sister at her school event." My dog's barking started to make me nervous. She's not necessarily a quiet dog, but she never barks at my family or I. I decided to tiptoe out of the bathroom and into my sister's room, which is right next to the front door. I looked through the blinds and I saw a man at my door. My heart drops. This isn't my mom or anyone that I knew. It's a man wearing all black, with ragged hair and a crowbar in his hand and what looked like, I guess, and I assumed that he had a gun in his pocket. I took a good look at him, so I'm sure it was a gun. He pounds on my door this time. I can see he's using both of his hands to do so. My dog starts going crazy at this point. Once she starts up, I see the man step back and beckon to the car in the front. Another guy jumps out and walks onto my porch. I decide that's enough. I run over to my dog's crate and let her out. She's not a large dog, but she's a loud one. She starts jumping at the door, barking so much that she had to take labor breaths and growling at the crack that reached to the outside. I hear a faint, "Oh hell no," before I hear a car slam and crunching gravel, a clear sign that the car has left. My dad rushed home, and I frantically explained about what happened. We searched our front yard and porch to check to see if they left any evidence. The only thing we found? Dents where the man had pounded onto the door. Okay, so I'm a SEAL, and at this time, I was deployed. My wife and I own a house just outside of Denver where she stays with our kids when I'm overseas. She's a teacher, so she's off in the summer and spends most of the time at home as she's not a huge people person. Our kids were in Florida, staying with their grandpa, so it was just her. My wife never liked being home alone, and I hated the thought of her being scared and just feeling vulnerable, but I didn't have much of a choice. I made sure that she knew how to use all of my guns and had a security system, so I like to believe that she's out there safe all by herself. One day, she was out shopping and she noticed a truck following her around. So she drove in a circle to confirm that she's in fact being followed. When they continued to follow, she did the smartest thing and she memorized the license plate and drove straight to the nearest police station. She filed a report, but nothing could be done. She went home and she was a bit on edge, but she just tried not to think about it. My wife is very beautiful, so attracting unwanted attention is something that she is sadly somewhat used to. Later that night, she was making herself some buffalo chicken and watching Netflix when she heard a tapping sound on the window. She couldn't identify the source of the sound, so she closed all the curtains and double-checked all the locks before carrying on with her night. When she was asleep, that night, a cold, dirty hand grabbed her by the throat so tight that she couldn't even speak. A large man looming over her, but she couldn't make out his face since it was just so dark. He barked at her to shut up and do not bite. As he started to undo his belt buckle, she caught on right away and kicked him right in the stomach to free herself. She threw herself off the bed and grabbed my handgun out of the nightstand. She doesn't remember much of this, but she shot him right in the face, but he somewhat kept coming at her. She kept shooting him until he stopped moving towards her. The police arrived quickly, and the man's remains a John Doe to this very day. She wasn't charged with anything, and she doesn't regret what she did. To this day, we have no clue on how he got in without setting alarms, but we are very thankful that our kids weren't home. We concluded that he somehow followed her home and got into the house without alerting her. We've since adopted a German Shepherd and a Doberman, as well as upgrading the security system. I'm so thankful I married a badass, and she was unharmed. This happened when I was a teen. I can't remember exactly when, but I think I was about 17 at this point. It was school holidays and I was at home with my friend, we'll call her Talia, and my domestic worker, we'll call her Let's Go. It was around 11 a.m. and we were all hanging out in my room. Let's Go had been washing dishes and she glanced out into the window, and in another window, she saw the reflection of two men in our backyard. She ran upstairs to tell me exactly what she had seen, and I immediately hit the panic button. The alarm started sounding loudly throughout the house. I remember calling my dad, telling him what's happening. but he was working and he was a bit far away. It would take some time to get here. I believe he called the police at this point. I wanted to run downstairs and lock the security gate at the bottom of the stairs, but at that point, even over the loud wailing of the house alarm, we could distinctly hear the crack of the wood splitting as the door opened of the back of the house. I was worried that they would be faster than us, and I decided not to go downstairs. Instead, we raced across the upstairs, landing to lock ourselves in my parents' room. We reached the bedroom door, and crap, there's no key. We ran back across the land again, and just as we were passing up the stairs, we saw those two guys bounding up on them just a meter or two away. They were very large men, at least over 6 feet tall, clutching in their hands a screwdriver and a rope. This is not a good sign. Let's go try to grab our cell phones from the guest room as we passed. One of the men slapped her across the face, grabbed the phones, and pushed her into the bedroom. Talia and I kept running, with the two men just a couple of meters behind us. We reached the end of the landing, dashed into my mom's office, and I slammed the door behind me. My heart sank as I heard the click of the key hitting the opposite wall. It had been on the other side of the door. Crap. At this point, Talia is hysterical, crying in the corner with both of her hands on her head as I held the door shut. What are we gonna do? Oh my god, oh my god. I felt strangely calm. I just remember thinking that I could not let anything happen to her. Knock, knock. Hello? I was in utter disbelief as the two intruders calmly knocked on the office door, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. We did not respond. And then again, knock, knock. Hello? Once again. Hello? Hello? Once again, we did not respond. The two men then started turning the doorknob and pushing the door open. I tried to stop the knob from turning, but I just couldn't get a good grip on it. I pushed back on the door, digging my heels into the carpet as deep as I possibly could. Just then, the phone started to ring. I knew it was armed response. I shouted to Talia, "Answer the phone! Tell him what's happening! Speak loudly!" I wanted the intruders to know that someone was on their way to save us. While she was on the phone with security, I was fighting with these two men with all my strength controlling the door. They pushed it open wide, enough for a small adult to slip through, and I shoved back with all my might and got it just about to shut again. It felt like this was going on forever, but in reality, it was probably only a few minutes. The whole time the alarm was blaring loudly. Eventually, the men left. After waiting it out a while, we felt safe enough to leave the room. My dad got there first, and we told him everything that happened. Armed response arrived 45 minutes after we spoke to them on the phone. Like, gee, thanks. We'd be dead already, or worse, but whatever. The police arrived 2 hours after them. Yeah, no one here relies on the cops in South Africa. It was only when we were explaining the whole thing to the cops that the reality started to set off and the adrenaline started to wear off. I went into shock and was all shaky for a bit, but I felt grateful that everyone was okay. I'm still amazed what adrenaline can do. How does a tiny teenage girl able to hold back two large grown men? It's just insane. After that day, I really realized what I'm capable of, and when crap hits the fan, and also, if crap goes down, you're really on your own and you really need to have a plan, because the chances are that no one is coming to give you a second chance at life. Only you can help yourself. So, that's probably the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. This happened about a year ago at my aunt's house. It was the summertime and the weather had been exceptional here and there. It was late around night, maybe around 3 or 4 in the morning. Usually during the summer, I would stay up watching YouTube or Netflix until sunrise. This particular night, something happened that I could only imagine. The house we were staying at only had one bathroom, and I had to go. It was currently occupied, and usually when that happens, I would just go outside and piss in the woods. I decided to do that again. I go out there, and it was like mid-60s. Very warm and clear skies. There's a main street straight across the house. I finish up and begin walking back to the house. Before I open the door, I hear a deep voice screaming, "Hey!" I was a little startled due to the fact that it was late night and someone was outside screaming. I thought it might have been neighbors arguing, but it seemed like they were a lot closer than that. I go back to look to see if there was something, but to my surprise, I see a very dark figure standing in the middle of the road. Me, being a dumbass, screamed back at him, sort of joking, yo. The figure didn't move at this point. I was creeped out because whoever it was didn't respond. Even though it was dark out, the lights on the side of the street gave me a little bit of a view of the person's face. It was looking directly at me, emotionless. I decided to turn back inside and let it go. I decided to watch YouTube again for about another hour or so. After finishing up, it was around 5 in the morning, so I decided to call it a night and crash. The next day, I woke up later in the evening. I go into the kitchen to get something to drink, and my mom was in a state of shock. I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she said that there was a home invasion last night across the street. I was so disturbed. I couldn't even speak. I eventually got my voice back, and I asked her if the cops catch the man involved. And she looked at me with wide eyes and said, "No." This happened about 7 years ago, but I never got over it. I was living on a basement suite on a relatively quiet street in a small town where nobody typically hangs out around at night. Being young and stupid, I often didn't bother to close any blinds, even though our windows were all on the ground level. It was about midnight, and I was lying on my bed in a nude. I had just gotten out of the shower, by the way, and talking to my boyfriend at the time with the lights on. So, basically, due to my idiocy, anyone could see me inside and look at me, but I would not be able to see them. More stupid than this was that my boyfriend and I decided to have passionate hugging on the phone under these conditions. When I was done on the phone and gotten dressed, I went to my roommate's bedroom to hang out with her. Immediately after I got into her bedroom, she and I heard someone aggressively trying to open my bedroom window. We rushed into my room, only to find them gone, but we heard loud footsteps running towards her bedroom instead. We then heard them trying to open her bedroom window, and failing at that, run it around to the side of the house and try the bathroom window, and then mine again. Next, we heard the trespasser running up the stairs at the back of the house that led to the upstairs suite where no one was home, and try the balcony door. At this point, we just called the police. The person was gone and never came back, but it definitely made me think twice about just being how reckless I was. Just knowing that someone was lurking outside my window, watching me in the aforementioned situation, and then just tried frantically to get into the house, knowing that my roommate and I were both in the house. It just terrifies me to this very day. Just to clarify, it wasn't possible for any of my neighbors to see me. I know what I did was dumb, but my window was in a position where it was legitimately only possible to see inside if you were purposely trying to lurk in my backyard, where there was nothing but forest and no line of sight of any other buildings. My bedroom was also only a few feet lower than the window, so you would have to try your absolute best to try to take a peek. So, creepy guy at the window, let's not meet ever again. This incident happened about 5 years ago. This is a story where I never tell anyone because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make, well, mean comments about what I should have done in this situation without really understanding how difficult your mind works when you're in an absolute panic. But you guys seem to get it. So, here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis, working as a ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my doors, and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habit for me to not lock my front door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in 5 years to this very day. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I started earlier in the day before to work. My front door opened and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early and I was happily called out to him. "I'm in here, love." Instead, I was met with silence. I began to feel that sinking feeling of something's wrong crawling up to my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply just hadn't heard me. I walked out into my living room / kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was a male, older than me. I would estimate 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this very moment. And he was just standing there, staring at me. No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wonder if maybe he just walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave, but as he continued to stare at me, I realized that I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed my chest in the attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do because I'm a small female, and used a loud, clear voice to tell him to get out of my apartment, that he had no business of being here. He completely ignored me, like I hadn't even spoken. Then he began to pick up my things, my cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and then put them in his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe that it was all a mistake until this very moment. I darted forward. Only other device that I had would allow me to get some help. My computer. I had to take few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but still about 15 to 12 feet between us. So I knew I can grab it and run before he can reach me. As soon as I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move towards me. I sprinted backwards to the bathroom because it was the only place I can go and put 2 locks between us, my bathroom door and my closet. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds, I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked the door too, opening my computer, getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent messages after messages, pleading with him to call 911 and tell him that there was an intruder in the apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone, and he was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened, and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break down the door too. Here's the part where people usually start to give me advice on how I should have reacted. But all I could tell you all was that I was just frozen, with fear, with shock. I don't know, but I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace a door or try to keep it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and just waited to die, because I just knew that's what's going to happen. People like to tell me that I live in an apartment. Surely if I scream for help, maybe someone will come and help me, right? Surely there was something heavy enough for me to grab in the closet to defend myself. Hell, if even my laptop would have hurt this guy if I swung at him. Why didn't I do anything? To be honest, I really don't have an answer for that. But the door miraculously held. I heard frustration steps going back and forth into the living room area, and I heard things breaking, like bottle shatterings in my drawers and refrigerators and cabinets being flung open as things were being torn out of them. I continued to sit in the closet, silently crying, wanting to leave, but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that very moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived about 15 hours drive away, and I told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort, and I told her how much I loved her. I'm not a parent, but I could just only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through, knowing that her daughter was in danger and that there was nothing that she could do to help me. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I told her to tell my brothers that I loved them, to help my husband through whatever happens next if it ended badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get into my apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this intruder left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband, shouting for me. The intruder walked out in the living room kitchen area, again, and I opened a door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with them, pinning him in the ground. The man kept mumbling at times, yelling, but never really put up much of a resistance. This entire part was a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filling with fear, mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually, the police found the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that, but from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time the officers arrived was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intent to bash him in any way. It just seems like it was just an unusual long response time for a home invasion. I got my things back from the man and took him out of the apartment. I numbly went through the process of filling a police report, telling them exactly what happened. One of the officers commented that I should have just kept my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was just being really insensitive to me at the time, or blaming me for what happened, but later recognized that his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen the situation end differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was finally over. But I've carried that fear, the violation, the anxiety of having someone intrude in my space of years. If it happened to me once, it could happen again. This is a quick story. I was at my job, just doing my job, and I get an alert on my phone. I figured that I would just watch the cameras after I get home. And so after the last 2 hours, I get 3 more alerts. And as I was taking my bus back to home, I watched the cameras, and I watched my ex take a hammer to my back door. I kept on watching as he struggled against the deadbolt, and then I saw him enter. I called the police faster than I could, and I told him that there was a break-in at my address. I continued to watch the video after that. 15 minutes after he entered, he left with a duffel bag. I arrived back to my house, only to see police outside. They had beat me to it. I identified myself as the homeowner and went inside to check the damage. The entire place was trashed, along with my duffel bag, and some jewelry was missing. I gave the police the evidence that it was my ex-boyfriend, and I gave him the place where he was crashing at. I then called out to put a restraining order against him, along with to replace the deadbolt. Not long after, they caught him at a pawn shop. He was trying to get back at me for dumping him. I am now happy with the restraining order in place, along with the ex in jail for a year for breaking and entering. For context, I'm a 20-year-old female, and I started an OnlyFans account over the summer to support myself through school. And things were great until I posted my Amazon wish list. So, Amazon doesn't release your address to people who gift you items, but third-party sellers can. That's when things went wrong. By the way, not trying to promote it here, this is a very frightening story, and I felt like it just was the best fitting for this subreddit. In late July, I got a puppy. One night after 2 in the morning, I took him outside to go to the bathroom. While he was doing his business, I noticed a car parked outside of my family home. I saw a figure in the car. I could only tell that they were looking at me, but I couldn't make out their face because it was just pitch black outside. Feeling a bit uneasy, I picked up my puppy to take him back inside, and when I started to move, the car parked in my driveway. I sprinted back inside and locked the door, but they never approached the house. The next morning, I went to check my mail. There was an envelope addressed to my OnlyFans account with a $20 bill in it. But that's it. No note. I was currently still at home with my parents, and they had no idea about my OnlyFans account, so I didn't mention it to them. A week later, I went back to my college town to get ready for school. At this time, I stopped posting for the time being, until I could figure out how they got my address. I watched enough crime shows to know that there was a possibility that I could be in danger. I live in a duplex with a gated parking lot, for reference. One morning, I was planning on vlogging my trip to Target because I was planning on starting a YouTube channel in the near future since OnlyFans felt unsafe. When I got to my car, it had been ransacked, and my vlogging camera was missing. I know it's my fault for leaving it in my car, but I was using it the night before, and since it was in a gated area, I just didn't think it would be unsafe. It wasn't in plain sight either. I had it hidden in the glove compartment. I used that exact camera to film my not safe for work content, and the SD card was in there, and it had all the unreleased photos. I know they stole it just for the SD card. Anyways, this is where the story gets weird. There are cameras outside the parking lot, so we were able to watch this person break into my car and find the camera. And they didn't even touch the other 7 cars in the parking lot, so they knew that which car was mine, which suggests that they had been watching me for a bit. After they got the camera, they walked around the duplex until stopping near my window. My bedroom faces an outside street, and my blinds are broken, so it's very easy to see in. I have a curtain, but it doesn't cover my window all the way. This freaking person watched me sleep for an hour or so. I have no idea why they didn't even try to break in, but thank God they didn't. This person sold the camera to a pawn shop, and since I knew the serial number, the police were able to find it. However, my SD card was still missing. I believe the police are still trying to track them down, but I have broken my lease and moved to a new place, so hopefully that will keep me safe. Hey, to the guy who terrorized me at my home, in my apartment, and stole my camera, let's not meet. I'm a 21-year-old female. I don't know how long this will actually be, but it took me about 4 days to be able to actually type this out. I don't know. I got these weird mini anxiety attacks when I tried. I'll be the first to admit that I have, or had, a very can't happen to me complex. And that's kind of what occurred in this story. I'm a university student, live in a rental house with other 5 people, and it's far from ideal. But in this housing outcry that we're having, it takes that sting off of us having to pay a bunch of money a month just to exist in a box. This has relevancy, I swear. I got extremely lucky last weekend when the 5 of the roommates I had were all out on the weekend. This has never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the whole house to myself. I did the whole 21-year-old girl home alone stuff you can think of. Watching movies with a loud volume, taking long-ass showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc., etc. It was around 10 p.m. I had finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. It sounded briefly like something moving on the porch. We had a fox in our yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise on our porch, so I assumed that had to be the case. After hearing some fumbling for the second time, I went over to check out through the window. There was nothing there. As I'm turning to head back into the living room, a piece of cement flies through our kitchen window. I think I peed myself a little bit when it happened, but I definitely screamed like a little girl. My moronic ass started unlocking the door to go outside, but common sense seized to control me again. I locked the door back. I also ran to the back door to make sure it was locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't make a difference. Oddly enough, at this time, my grandma's words came into my head about something her own daughter had told her. If someone tries to break into your house, turn all the lights off. You know the inside of your house better than they do. I immediately shut off all the lights in the living room and managed to turn off the TV, which was hard because my hands were shaking badly. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, which were not resonant at this time. I secured myself in the upstairs bedroom and had to turn all the lights off in the house as I passed by them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously from the front door. I don't know if there was more than one person or if they realized that they couldn't jump the fence to get into the yard. While calling for emergency services on my phone, I secured my hunting knife at the end of the hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. I know that's probably the most Canadian thing to say. If I was going to have to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark, holding my makeshift spear, for what probably felt like 15 minutes. I'm really glad I wasn't being murdered in that amount of time. The operator told me that the police were coming, which eventually they did. It took a very unsettling amount of time. The only reason I left the bedroom in the first place was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs, and the police lights were flashing through the window. Otherwise, someone would just had come right in and physically pull me out of the room. Statements were given, and that's all they did. Literally, all they did. Literally all they did. Nothing else. Literally that. I am livid. But a very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the weekend. So shout out to the officer cutie with the tattoos. I made an appointment with the doctor to get out my anxiety medicines, as well as medicine for nightmares. I know I wasn't in physical danger at that point, but I had some very charming dreams of similar scenarios, and I just find it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but hey, I'm human. Meds are working fine, and I'm back at my house, the wall-to-wall people again, and honestly, I don't hate that so much anymore. So please, everyone, have a fun and safe weekend. It was the summer before my freshman year of high school. The year was 1998. My parents and younger brother were out of town, and I was basking in the freedom of being home alone for the entire day. I spent most of my time staying upstairs being quiet the entire time while watching cable TV. I chatted on the phone with my friends because, three-way phone call, oh my god. After a few hours of MTV watching and phone chatting, I decided it was time to relax in the bubble bath and read a Stephen King book because that was my favorite pastime. My bedroom and bathroom were side by side on the second story of a very large 3-story house that sat at the edge of the small town. My dad was a local pastor in the small town, so we would have random people show up at our hour of the day or night, feeding food and just giving out money. And sometimes they can be very persistent. I was instructed that when I was home alone, I was to not answer the door. Just stay out of sight until people would just go on about their day. This strategy had worked for years, so why change it now? On this particular day, all has been quiet. The bathroom was upstairs and out of sight of any doors. It was the only interior door that was locked, so I've always felt relatively safe in there. I shut off my TV, hung up the phone. Yes, corded to the wall. Oh my god, right? I went to the bathroom and ran a bubble bath. Once the tub was full, I climbed in and started reading my book. I got about a chapter in when all hell broke loose. I heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the kitchen below me, the room to the left at the foot of the stairs. Also, the room with the back door in it, which consists of a giant double pane of really old glass. My mother was always scolding us for shutting the door too hard. She was convinced that we would break it. The sound of breaking glass is followed by a loud voice of a man's voice. A man that was not my father's. I got out of the tub as quickly and quietly as I could, grabbed a towel, closed the bathroom door, and slid the lock over. I stood at the door, listening for what felt like an eternity. Then again, from the kitchen, a man's voice. This time, quickly followed by a woman's voice that was not my mother. Jeez. 2 damn intruders were in the kitchen. And there I stood, butt naked, dripping wet, with nothing but a bath towel to protect me. Now I'm in a really full-blown panic. What the hell was I supposed to do? I look around the bathroom for weapons, and the best thing I come up with was a plastic handle toilet plunger. Like that was gonna help. At this point, I realized that I haven't heard anyone for a couple of minutes. So I decided that I was going to sneak out to the top of the stairs and just give it a listen. Maybe they left after realizing that we didn't have many items of street value. Armed with a toilet plunger, I unlocked the bathroom and tiptoed to the top stairs. Within seconds of them talking in the kitchen, I decided I needed an evacuation plan and better weapons. I tiptoed back into the bedroom and relocked the door. I knew I didn't have much time until they come over to explore/rob the upstairs, so I had to hurry. I knew that when I get to the bottom of the stairs, I would be in full view of the kitchen, and the stairs creaked, so they would definitely hear me coming. I also knew that the base of the stairs led to the front door, if I make a quick right. So, I realized if I get down and out the door before they realize what's going on, I might be okay. But if they heard me coming, I might be fighting for my life. So I need a good weapon because it was going to be at least 2-on-1 fight. I snuck out of the bathroom and into my bedroom. The whole time I heard them in the kitchen area. The best thing I come up with in my bedroom was a lighter and a bottle of hairspray. I will melt the bastard's face off. And went back to the top of the stairs and listened again. The sons of bitches were still down there. I counted to 3 and made a run for it. Lighter and hairspray at the ready. I reached the landing and turned to glance at the kitchen. That's when everything became obvious. Sitting in the middle of the kitchen table was my father's pager for the squad. The male EMT was telling the female dispatcher that they had just arrived at the hospital. I let out a big whoosh of air and started hysterically laughing at my stupidity. The door wasn't broken, and I was still home alone. Frickin' pagers.